Hello again, fellow Mystery Files. Today I will be reviewing the Inspector Allen Mysteries series, which ran for 9 episodes in the early 1990s. And all 9 of these episodes I thought were pretty good. I mean, we don't have a lot of adaptations of Niall Marsh novels, so I consider this series the gold standard, at least for now. I want to thank multiple viewers who informed me the pilot episode, Artist in Crime, was available online, as it had been lost for quite some time and I hadn't watched it until now. Fair warning, there may be spoilers for the books and the episodes ahead, and for the most part, the episodes are faithful to the books, so if you've read the book or watched the episode, you're probably okay. But before I begin, make sure you like and subscribe to keep up to date with the channel. I'm going to go episode by episode, but I want to start by talking about the recurring characters and actors. First up is the big guy, Roderick Allen, played by Patrick Malahide, and there was a different actor playing Allen in the pilot, but I'll talk about him there. And Patrick Malahide really nails Allen's subtleness. I think there's this impression that Allen is boring compared to like the other Queen's main male detectives, and I understand that, but Allen has this like subtle snarkiness and humor to him that Patrick Malahide really captures. He resists the temptation to be overdramatic and allows Alan's personality to come out. Like the other recurring characters, Alan isn't an exact replica of the book. And I think it's because the series starts with Agatha Troy already in the picture, so we don't get a lot of references to like the handsome Alan or like Alan flirting with actresses. That's okay. And Agatha Troy is played by Belinda Lang, who you might recognize today as Mrs. Clam on Sister Boniface. And she's also married to Hugh Fraser, who plays Captain Hastings in the David Suchet Poirot series. And unfortunately, we never got like a crossover there, but whatever. And she's fantastic. I've seen so many actors portray artists very poorly, and Belinda Lang is great. I can believe she is a painter. She has great chemistry with both actors who play Alan, and like her character as well, I think Agatha Troy is even more of a forceful presence in this series than she is in the books. Her and Alan get into some pretty heated debates and arguments, mostly over his job, and while we do get these debates in the books, they are much calmer and more cerebral than they are here. There is like a screen tension between the two that works very well. William Simons plays Inspector Fox, and he's very much the same. He's actually comes across a lot smarter in the adaptations than he does in the books, but he's still the same beloved Brer Fox. His relationship with Alan is the same. He actually appears to be like a little more independent than in the books. He investigates on his own at times, and again, I think William Simons nails the role excellently. And the final recurring character discussed here is Tim Dutton as Sergeant Bailey, and this Bailey is so much more vibrant than he is in the books. There's no Thompson, so Bailey sort of doubles as both, and he's actually a very competent, brainy sergeant, different from his literary counterpart, but that's probably necessarily. And I like Bailey's a lot in this series. He was criminally underutilized, and he doesn't appear in every episode, just really like a handful. All right, let's get into the episodes. Starting out with the pilot episode of Artists in Crime. And this is not the first book in the series, but it is an excellent launching pad for the adaptations. I mean, this is the book I recommend new readers begin with. It introduces Agatha Troy to the series and really sets off the series in a strong trajectory. I think it's a natural starting place to begin. Alan here is played by Simon Williams for this episode only, and it must have been very confusing on the set having both a Simon Williams and a William Simons in the cast. But anyway, Simon Williams is also very good as Alan. The series is set after World War II, and all the episodes move to that era. As a result, Alan suffers from bouts of PTSD that make a relationship with Troy a little more complicated. The wonderful scene at the beginning of the book where Alan and Troy meet is significantly abridged and moved to England, which is fine. They're only about 90 minutes long, so you have to adjust. And the two have wonderful chemistry together. Honestly, their romantic chemistry is probably better than the romantic chemistry between Patrick Malahide and Belinda Lang. And as far as the mystery goes, I think it's adapted wonderfully. It's mostly faithful, and it really plays up the more lurid parts of the plot. It might sound strange, but Niall Marsh and her contemporaries have this like reputation for being a bit prudish and shying away from like taboo subjects like sex and romance, which isn't really true, and this episode demonstrates that. Artist in Crime is a little bit sexy, and there's a lot of artistic nudity in this episode, and it's done very tastefully and fitting with the book. Both of the murders are very gruesome, and the gruesomeness is played down in the adaptations, probably for the better. And there's a new subplot involving armor and cross-dressing that I didn't need. I also thought the main victim in Sonia, the artist model, wasn't as layered as she was in the book. She's a very complicated figure that didn't come out here. And some of the other characters, like Felida Lee, just like didn't shine as much as they did in the book. But I thought this was a very strong start to the series. I enjoyed it a lot. I think the episode does a good job of introducing the main characters and demonstrating the murder mystery. There's some great scenes with Alan's mother meeting Troy that I enjoyed that are really occur in like later books, but they moved them here, and that made sense. I thought this was a very good episode overall. The next episode is A Man Lay Dead, which I thought was as good as it was going to get. I mean, to be honest, this is a rare time I wish an adaptation had changed up murder mechanics. They left everything mostly intact, and it was still implausible. I will say, like, generally speaking, watching a plot play out does put things like a different perspective than simply reading it. They often make more sense to me, like seeing it play out. But this one was still rough. It didn't come across as more ridiculous, which was good. And I'm not going to spoil like the mechanics of the murder in case you haven't seen or read it yet, but and the entire Russian subplot is replaced with basically a similarly functioning subplot involving theft of religious artifacts. It does nothing to improve or worsen the plot, in my opinion. The plot is largely focused on Alan and Troy's relationship. Angela North has been cut and replaced with Troy. And there's a lot of fun, plot points of like running around here, but Alan not wanting to go to this house party and meet Troy's friends and all of Troy's friends thinking her boyfriend is fictional. It gave up very strong, like, I have a boyfriend or girlfriend in Canada vibes. And Nigel Bathgate is in this adaptation, and I thought the actor played him very well. He is not a recurring character in the series, which is a shame, but overall, this episode was fine. I mean, one of the weaker ones, but to be honest, it didn't have a lot going for it to begin with. So a lot of it does focus on the Troy Allen relationship, which was pretty interesting here. The next episode is the nursing home murder, which was a very strong one. The political intrigue elements are still present and form the backstory. I thought it was a little better incorporated in the episode, as like Alan and Fox are really investigating this stuff before the murder of Sir Derek happens. The bill in question has actually been changed from dealing with anarchists to dealing with the Israel and Palestinian situation, as this is in the late 1940s here, and that still remains very relevant. It was weird watching them have a discussion, just a couple of weeks ago. And the show does a good job of being vague enough over the plot and not taking sides. I found the acting in this one to be very superb. I mean, Judy Parfitt and Anna Massey play Lady O'Callahan and Ruth O'Callahan, respectively, and they were fantastic. I mean, they really nailed the roles. And again, this one was very faithful to the novel. It thankfully removes a lot of like the repetition the book had, and Alan goes over the surgery routine so many times in the book, and that's all gone here. And there are some minor changes, and I think that episode really demonstrates how skilled the series was at making those small changes when necessary without changing the overall plot. And this is one of my favorite episodes in the series. My favorite episode of the series is probably the next one, Final Curtain. I think this episode really clarifies the book for me. As wacky and as fun as the characters are, I feel like in the book, the Ancred family just sort of like blends together, and seeing them on screen really helps sort things out. I think watching an adaptation after reading the book is a good strategy because the adaptations help me understand the book more, and that's what Final Curtain does. I mean, the way the show inserts Alan is pretty good, where this is another one where Alan doesn't really appear in the book until later on, and the show has to like get the big stars in earlier. This episode is initially told in flashback by Troy to Alan, and in doing this, the show remains faithful to the book, but also gets Alan in there earlier. And the scenes of Alan and Troy are great. Alan has just come home from France from on a job, and he has like no interest in solving this murder. He has no interest in hearing the story, and she knows this, but he still listens anyway, and she still tells it. And the dynamic here is very different between the characters than it is in the book. It's actually wonderful. It really works in a way that doesn't warp the novel relationship in any way. Final Curtain is one of the few, it might actually be the only episode in the series that changes the ending in a non insignificant way. The second murder victim from the book survives the attempt here, which leads to the murderer's arrest, with the implication they will be hanged. And this is a much more dramatic and successful ending than in the book, where the second victim dies, and while the murderer is arrested, Alan basically says the charges are going to be dropped because there's no evidence. And that's not the case here. I think the book's ending is fine, but it's just so much better in this one. The next episode was Death at the Bar, which is a book I don't particularly care for, but I enjoy the adaptation. I think this episode is the best we get of Alan's relationship with his male friends, although here they make Alan a professional slash personal friend of the victim, Luke Watchman, and they have this bro date together at the spa, and they get like a couple's massage and they share a sauna. I thought it was a nice character moment for Alan, and once again serves to bring Alan into things much earlier. The story is again partially told in flashback, which this does get a bit stale after seeing it as many times as the series is sort of like forced to do this, but I don't really hold that against them. You know, the anarchist communist plot is still here, but it's much more toned down. And most importantly for me, the scene where Inspector Fox gets poisoned is so much more effective here than it is in the book. Like, I don't believe it in the book where Alan claims to be upset, but I never like felt it, and I feel it so much more in this episode. And there's also like a new gay romance between Parrish and Cubit, which is fine. It's not comical like these sometimes can be. Like a lot of these shows from the 90s inserted like same sex relationships out of nowhere. We see that a lot in like the ITV Poirot and Marple series. It's much more effectively done here. And I thought episode was much stronger than the book, in my opinion, because I don't really care for the book, but I could watch this episode again and again. The next episode is Death in a White Tie, which was another very strong episode. This book has a lot of characters and a lot going on, and the episode keeps it all there. Now, that probably helps because they don't have to insert Alan or Troy into this because they're already in it from the start in the book. And they do actually cut out the character of Violet Harris, the secretary, which was fine. I mean, this episode keeps all the little character quirks these people have. So many adaptations, not just of these, but of from any mystery author, they focus on the mystery, often to the sake of the characters. The adaptations don't pick up on the little nuances of character, but this one does. It keeps the minor character of Lady Lorimer, who is this like senile old socialite everyone finds annoying. She doesn't really serve a plot purpose outside of like Marsh using her to like criticize the debutante world, but she's so easily could have been cut and wasn't. And it's the same with like Colonel Halcut Hackett and Rose, the debutante, whose party it actually is, and who's just like totally miserable and hates everyone. It's all there. It's great. The murder plot is the same. Alan has the same like vengeful fury he does in the book. We unfortunately don't get my favorite point in the book about like the cloak going off to China, but that is like such a small part of it. This is definitely one of the best episodes of the series and probably the most faithful in terms of like keeping Marsh's commentary intact. The final three episodes came from series two. The first of these was Hand in Glove, and this is another one where I think the book is made clearer by the adaptation. When I first read the book, I didn't like firmly picture like what the scaffolding and everything looked like, and having this adaptation made it so much clearer to me. This isn't necessarily one I would have selected considering some of the books they never adapted, but you know, that's their choice. And this is another one where they keep a lot of those small character moments. My biggest fault here is that I wish we saw more of like the scavenger hunt since it was such an important part of the plot. Instead, the episode focuses a lot more on like the cardinals and which I think is a bit of a giveaway and a spoiler, but there's also a new subplot in which there are forgeries of Agatha Troy's paintings in circulation, and this is how they like shoehorn Alan and Troy into the plot from the start. I found like the content interesting, but like it didn't flow smoothly with the overall murder plot. It did provide some great character moments from Troy and Alan, but it did feel a bit disjointed, and I think that makes this episode one of the weaker ones in the series. The next episode was Dead Water, and I will admit I barely remember this book, and I barely remembered this episode until I rewatched it for this video, and I loved it. I honestly couldn't make comments on how faithful this is to the book because I really don't remember the details, but I thought Margaret Tyzak was fantastic as Miss Pride, Alan's former teacher. I love the tension in this one between Alan and Troy, where Troy just like really has had it with Alan's work, especially since now he's investigating on behalf of Miss Pride and it's not even like his own assignment. It actually gives off like very strong like interfering mother-in-law vibes towards Miss Pride. And of course, Troy loves Alan's mother, but we only see her in that first episode. And here, Miss Pride definitely takes over the role of like bossy mother-in-law. This was definitely a strong episode, made stronger by the fact that I didn't really remember it or the book from my previous watches and reads. So it was like everything was like a new experience for me. And the final episode was The Scales of Justice, which again remains very faithful. Alan is inserted into this one earlier by a new subplot involving some like international diplomatic affairs, and this actually does relate to the plot, but it felt very much at odds with the murder. Alan still like doesn't go anywhere near the village until about halfway through. It's very jarring watching like the pre-murder plot stuff in the village of Swivenings with the like the Lacklanders and the Carterets, and then like all the Allen stuff separately. It's like watching two different films cut into one and going back and forth. It wasn't incorporated well, which was a shame because it actually is textual. Like the subplot doesn't come out of nowhere. And Alan is very humorous in this one. You know, he keeps tricking his boss. I should say, like, Alan has a boss in this series who, like, isn't really in the book, but he despises Alan because he's like an aristocrat and he's jealous and he's always trying to get Alan like to get into that crowd, and Alan just like hates those people. And there's a great scene where Alan tricks his boss into taking his place at like this really boring event with Alan's brother. And this is probably the novel that most plays up Marsh's mocking of the aristocracy, and it is fully retained. I actually wish there was more of like the fishing plot line going on. It's all there with the fish, but I didn't feel as if like the episode like it did feel sorry that the episode shied away from it. You know, the switching of the fish and the competition over like who can catch the Olden, and like the fact that like fish scales work like fingerprints. It was all there, but they didn't really stress the importance as much as I wish they would have. I think this is probably one of the weaker episodes, but it was still pretty strong in my opinion. And that is it for this video. I do apologize if my voice is a little off, as I'm suffering from a little bit of a cold right now. So if any stray coughs that got into the recording, you'll know why. Let me know in the comments what you think about the series. I wish we had more episodes, or at least a newer adaptation of Roderick Allen. He's due for one. And there was an earlier miniseries from 1977 which had 4 episodes starring George Baker as Inspector Allen before he played Inspector Wexford. I vaguely remember watching these episodes at some point, but I can't find them now. So if anyone knows where I can watch those, let me know. And if you're brand new to the channel, check out some of my past videos. I noticed a large uptick in followers last week. About 50 to 60 of you are brand new, which is about, 1/5 of my subscribers. So thank you so much for that. Next week, I have another review of a Christie novel. This time, it's Death Comes as the End, celebrating its 80th anniversary this year, so stay tuned for that. Until next time, Mystery Files.